Hood, I mean, of course, it's not as bad as the roof because it didn't have a soft top, but it is all cracked. So I'm gonna have to do a bunch of filler primer on that. I'm not doing any skim coats. Hopefully filler primer will do it. If not, it'll have cracks. I'm telling you, I promise. I don't know what's going on here and here. Maybe it's not flat. Maybe it does need the slightest layer of, but when you go and get it in the right lighting, you know, if you get the reflections out of it, there's nothing there. You can still see the circle there, but I'm telling you, when I run my hands over it, even with my eyes open, I cannot feel a single thing. So, I worked on the trunk, got the bumper off. I am doing 40 grit on all these heavy areas. So the trunk, the hood, the areas on the fender where the clear coat was like half peeled off, those areas I was doing the 40 grit with. Everything else I'm gonna start with 80, which honestly is overkill since I'm okay. The side panels still have clear coat on them, but this stuff, I think I got rid of the ridge here just by taking the paint all the way off. This is bare metal. I took it all the way to the body line. I'm gonna keep going with the 40 on the power sander. That was the only way I was able to get it to go here. There's still probably still a ridge. I can't really feel it, but there's probably still one here. There's just not here anymore, which is nice. And I don't know, it looks all right, but I gotta let this stuff dry. It's still not dry. It's been 4 or 5 hours and it's still not dry. I can still dent it with my finger. I mean, let me try to show you. It just doesn't focus. See that? Boom. There's a dent right there now with my fingernail. Stupid. So let's let this dry. I loaded up the fireplace. We're gonna let this puppy dry overnight and then we'll see what it looks like tomorrow, but I don't think I'm gonna mess. We've got like 3 or 4 days of this cold weather. I think the metal of the car is too cold and that's why stuff's not drying. So I'm gonna probably just work on sanding the rest of the car. I gotta go through multiple grits of sandpaper on the entire car all the way up to 600 or 800. So I'll probably get working on that over the cold days and not mess with any more of the body work, and then I'll just blend the body work once the weather warms back up. The hood has been fillered. It's probably gonna need another round. This is just the initial round. Let's see, try to show you what I'm working with here. See all those little specks? Basically the paint cracked. And just putting the filler in there, and I'm gonna sand this off. I did this a couple days ago, so it's finally dry. I'll sand it back down, and then it's probably gonna need another round. Over here, I also am trying to smooth out this, basically it's this. The paint completely flaked off. It goes from metal up to like 3 layers of paint. A primer, a paint, and then another layer of paint. So we'll try to smooth off that area and see what that looks like. I'm done with the lowest grit. I think I did like 40 on the heavy areas. I didn't do the corners or like the areas that still had clear coat. Those I'm just gonna start with probably 80. That I don't even need to go that low really because the body's fine and I'm not trying to make it a 10 out of 10 paint job. So I'm done with the heavy stuff. I'll probably start scuffing this off with either 80 by hand because I don't want to agitate it too much and cause it to flake off. I don't know how dry it is. Maybe I'll use the power sander and then I'll just start doing the rest of the car with the 80 or maybe my 120. And I think this area is done. I think it needs a little back here and then I'll work on that other spot, the real bad spot again, and it should be ready to just sand down the rest of the car, open the doors up, get the panels off, and shoot paint. Another quick primer job. Real light coat again, so you know you can kind of see through it in a lot of areas, but man, this is hard to. It's okay if I get the lighting right. You can still see these ridges in here from the cracked paint. They're still there, but in some areas they're covered up. You know, over in here, can't see them, it's just dusty. Certain areas they've been covered up, certain areas are still there. Some of it's deep. There were some stripes on here that looks like I really need to sand those off. Looks like I did a little bit there, so, and then up there. So I've got more sanding to do on the hood. This area back here, it's another light coat of filler primer on it. It's not bad. There's still a pretty big ridge that you can see in the light right there where the soft top kind of ended and then the paint started. It's hard to blend that out, but I should be able to do it with some more filler primer. I think the roof is done. That little line there, it's never going to be perfectly straight because I didn't bow the metal out when I was putting it in there because it's going to be under the chrome trim. But everything else up there looks fine. This area is pretty much good to go. Paint's still drying. There's a couple creases. You can see one running vertically right there. There's a couple creases just from putting the filler primer or the filler glazing putty in that I need to do another round of filler or glazing putty and then sand them out. But otherwise, I'm gonna get rid of this ridge and then a couple streaks and then it'll be pretty much done. The only other areas are these areas. I gotta blend them with the glazing putty, which I'm gonna do that right now because I think I showed it to you. That worked really well. I put a tiny bit of glazing putty in like some of these areas, but the leftover that I had over here I didn't, so you can still see the ridge. But the areas where I did it, you really can't tell anymore that there's that crease. So I'll pretty much take care of that, and then I'll get the hood as good as I can. And we'll just start sanding the rest of the car. At this point, I think it's probably getting repetitive. What I'm showing you guys, it's the same stuff, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of how many times and coats it's going to take to get the finish that I get, and I'll show you what finish I get paint-wise. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but I mean, you can, if you look close in there, you can still see, you can obviously tell it's filling in cracks. So I've got to sand all this off again. Did a couple areas over here that I was paranoid about that I don't think needed it. An area there that did, and then over there. So more sanding, I guess. I've lost track of what number this is, but it's more filler on the hood, glazing putty, and I've started to sand down the rest of the car with 80 grit. Alright, I think this side is done. I mean, it's just hard to tell on camera with all the different colors. Jeez. Still real dusty, but it's pretty much perfectly flat now in this whole area. I don't see anything else that bothers me. This part of the car is ready to be sanded down all the way up to 800 grit. 600 really would be fine. And I'm working on the rest of the car now, but we just have that other side to do a final sand on before I think the whole car. I gotta pull off more trim pieces. There's these little mud flap things in the rear, and then I can get the rest of the car down to where I want it. It's a lot of sanding. Just keep working at it, keep adding filler, keep sanding it off. Eventually it smooths out. So this is after the 150, and after a wipe off. The dust usually gives it a bit of a nice protective layer, but I don't know how well it's coming in on camera. You know, if you see it like this without any primer or paint, you can see all these little chips, but you cannot feel them, and when you get a coat of paint on them, you can't see it. So that's my plan for that. Let's see, the hood, you know, just lost a little bit of its primer because I went over it with 150. This section lost a bit of its paint, and then down to primer in some areas and metal because we've got some high and low spots. I don't think this one's going to be too wavy. The other side, it's definitely going to be wavy on the passenger, but I don't care enough. You know, all those spots you're looking at are high. You can see a pretty big, you know, obvious indentation here. It just needs a lot more filler, really, to recreate this whole angle from where the tree hit it, or whatever hit it and drug along it. But I don't care. It'll be good enough for me from 10 yards away. So, what's next? Our next grit is after 150. It's gonna be 320 is what I'll go to next. So,
probably can't hear me all that well, but all of the 150 is done. I did put some filler in some certain areas, but I need to wait for that to dry before I hit it with the 150. Now I'm going to do everything in 320, but here's where I start wiping the car down with a damp rag or acetone in between sanding passes, because there's so much dust built up on it that I like to get it all off before I start sanding the next layer. So we're going to do some 320, but I'm going to wipe the car down first.
Alright. The entire car has been hit with 320 now. Wiped that off, then I did all of the major surfaces with 600. I really don't think the 600 is necessary at all, because my next step is I'm going to hit this all with filler primer, the entire car. I want to get it one even coat, just so that I can make sure I'm not going to see through on some of these areas where I've got different color paints and just different lines. I want to make sure all of that comes out clean, clear, and you can't see through it. So I don't know that doing the 600 matters if I'm gonna filler primer over it. Filler primer is pretty thick. After I do the filler primer, I'm gonna hit the entire car with 800 everywhere, most likely 600 or 800, and then we can get in the inside, take off the panels, and then start painting and spraying. So we're nearing completion on all of the prep work. We're almost ready to spray. Okay, so par for the course for a lot of my projects. Start out well-intentioned, got all these big ideas. I was going to filler primer the entire car and then sand it, but I mean, that filler primer, it's like $8 a can. I don't want to mix up and spray it out of an HVLP gun. I'm just using cans. I only ended up priming the spots that I thought were most important, the parts that I really want the hood to shine and be nice and flat. That, or the car, that was the hood. The roof was already dead smooth from all the priming and sanding I did. And then this trunk patch back here, because I was a little worried about it. It just looked real gritty and a lot of sanding marks, and I couldn't tell how deep they were. So I hit it with the filler primer, a real light layer, and you really couldn't see any of the sanding through it. So I don't think we're gonna have a problem in any of these other areas where you can kind of see these pigtail sanding marks. I don't think they're gonna show through. And then I sanded this with 600 grit. Same thing with the hood, it got 600. And the whole thing is darn smooth and perfect. I mean, it's almost like glassy when you look at it. You can see it's almost like you're wet sanding. You see a couple tiny, high spots here and there, but otherwise it's almost got a reflective sheen after sanding it with that 600. So hopefully the paint will stick to it. Let's push this thing forward, get the bags off the doors, and start tearing down the interior so I can scuff that up and get it ready for paint.